Have you ever felt that feeling of injustice when someone belittles you without even knowing you? Have you ever been looked down on and treated like you have no value? That's right. The story you're about to hear now is proof that the world goes around, and that arrogance can be someone's biggest mistake. Imagine walking into a place and before you even say a word, being judged by your appearance. Without knowing who you are, without knowing your story, without imagining the impact your presence can have. That's exactly what happened to Snoop Dogg, but what no one expected was that this public humiliation would become an unforgettable lesson, a turnaround so epic that it left everyone with their mouths open. Do you know when someone underestimates the wrong person? When you treat someone with contempt and then regret it bitterly? This is the essence of poetic justice, when karma acts quickly and teaches a lesson that no one forgets. And here, fate was merciless. A luxury store owner was used to judging his customers just by what they wore. For him, appearance was everything. If you didn't look like a millionaire, then you weren't worthy of attention. And it was exactly this thought that led him to make the biggest mistake of his life. That afternoon, Snoop Dogg entered the venue calmly, without fanfare. He wore simple, unostentatious clothes. But before he even had the chance to say anything, a look of contempt was thrown at him, a mocking smile, a laugh full of arrogance. The store owner didn't know who he was. And in fact, he didn't even care. To him, that man didn't seem to have enough money to be there, and that's where it all started. Have you ever seen the exact moment when someone realizes they made a huge mistake? That look of shock when reality hits you like a punch in the stomach. That was the scene that unfolded a few minutes later. A simple gesture changed everything. And the turn of events that happened was so unexpected that it made news all over the world. But before revealing what happened, answer me here in the comments. Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever been treated with contempt by someone who didn't even know you? Comment here, because this story will show you that life always finds a way to correct injustices. The story you are about to hear took place in one of those places where luxury is in every detail. A sophisticated environment, full of people who exude wealth and power. It was a famous designer store, known for serving the elite, a space where each piece sold costs more than many people's salaries in an entire year. Inside, everything was impeccable. Shiny chandeliers hung from the ceiling, the hallways were wide and lined with imported marble, and the windows displayed exclusive items, tailor-made for those who can spend millions without even looking at the price. The customers who frequented that place were not ordinary people. They were billionaire businessmen, movie stars, heirs to great fortunes. Their money was not just a means of purchasing, it was a status symbol. To be treated well, it was enough to be dressed according to the standard. Appearance was the first and only screening to decide who deserved attention and who should be ignored. If you didn't show off rich details, if you didn't wear obvious brands or very expensive watches, you could be treated like anyone else. And that was exactly the store owner's mentality. He considered himself more than a simple merchant. He thought he was a guardian of exclusivity, a curator of who could and could not enter his domain. He didn't just sell clothes or accessories, sold an experience reserved for the elite. And therefore, if someone seemed outside of this standard, he did not hesitate to belittle, ignore, or even expel them. After all, in his distorted view, this type of person did not deserve to be there. That day, the movement in the store was intense. Elegantly dressed women tried on million-dollar jewelry. Businessmen negotiated while choosing tailored suits, and employees served customers with practiced smiles and an almost servile posture. The environment was a perfect reflection of high society, where appearance defined the respect you received. It was into this scenario that Snoop Dogg entered. No security guards, no advisors, no fanfare. He walked through the main entrance like any other customer would, walking with his characteristic calm, taking his time, just taking in what the store had to offer. But for the owner of the place, that scene didn't make sense. Who was that man in simple clothes with a cap and sunglasses? What was he doing there? He didn't look like one of the usual upscale customers. In fact, to the owner, he didn't seem like someone who should even be in that environment. It was then that the first error occurred. The store owner, without even waiting for Snoop to say anything, let out a discreet laugh. A laugh full of irony, of superiority. For him, it was funny to see someone who, in his eyes, didn't fit into that space. It was as if he was witnessing a private joke, something only he understood. The problem? Snoop Dogg noticed, but he didn't react immediately. He did not show irritation, nor did he confront the store owner. Instead, he continued to calmly look at the products as if he was just enjoying the moment. This attitude made the store owner feel even more entitled to act arrogantly. He did not know who was before him, and so, without hesitation, he made the decision that would later become his biggest regret. He decided to ignore Snoop Dogg completely, without asking if he needed help, without offering assistance, without even pretending to be polite. For him, that client simply didn't exist. At the same time, other customers entered the store and were welcomed with a red carpet. Imported coffees, champagne, and personalized service were offered. But for Snoop, nothing. No words, no gestures, just contempt. And while this was happening, the rapper watched everything. He saw how other people were treated. He saw employees going out of their way to serve those who seemed important. And I saw how the store owner was having fun with the situation without even imagining what was about to happen. That mistake could still be fixed. There was still time for the store owner to realize his arrogance and change his attitude. But he went further. Not only did he ignore Snoop Dogg, he also made sure to show his superiority. When he saw that Snoop Dogg was still in the store, walking the aisles and looking at the products, he decided to take action. He approached with a mocking smile and said something that made the entire room silent for a moment. "Sir, maybe this store isn't exactly what you're looking for," a phrase said with false politeness but full of contempt. He didn't directly send Snoop away, but the message was clear. You don't belong here. It was as if he was saying that this space was too exclusive for someone like him, that perhaps it would be better to look for another store, something more appropriate to his style. It was at that moment that everything changed. Snoop Dogg stopped walking. He looked at the store owner, not rushing, not losing his cool. The smile he always had on his face disappeared for a moment. He didn't need to say anything immediately, because the silence that fell in the store was enough for some people to begin to realize that something was wrong. What the store owner didn't know was that that moment, that single sentence, was about to become the biggest nightmare of his life. Now, tell me, have you ever seen someone make a mistake so big that in a matter of minutes, everything around them collapses? Have you ever witnessed a turn of events so brutal that it completely transforms a situation? Because what happened right after made that store owner learn the biggest lesson of his life. And if you think that the snub was enough to make Snoop Dogg leave without a reaction, you are very mistaken. What happened next was a real shock for everyone present. If you have ever felt the weight of injustice, if you have ever been treated with contempt by someone who thought they were superior, then get ready, because the next part of this story will show you how fate can act in a merciless way when the time comes to settle the accounts. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been through a similar situation? Have you ever been treated with contempt, ignored, or underestimated by someone who felt they had the right to judge by appearance? Tell me here in the comments, because I read them all. Respect is the basis of everything. The way we treat others says more about us than any designer clothes, any bank account or social status. And this story is not just about a mistake made by the store owner, but about how life has a way of teaching great lessons to those who insist on acting arrogantly. So if you believe that poetic justice exists, that karma does not fail, and that no one should be judged by their appearance, comment below, "The world goes around." Let's make this message reach more people, and take the opportunity to like the video, because it helps a lot to spread stories like this to more people. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because I always bring stories that show how fate can be ruthless towards those who underestimate others. But hold on tight, because this story is far from over. If you thought the store owner's arrogance had gone overboard, just wait and see what happened when Snoop Dogg decided to respond. What he did next left everyone in shock. The store's automatic door slowly opened, and a man entered without making a fuss. He did not arrive surrounded by security guards, did not ask for special treatment, and much less announced his presence. He just walked with the calmness of someone who has been to thousands of places like that, but without the slightest need to prove anything to anyone. He was wearing simple clothes, a comfortable sweatshirt, loose pants, and a discreet cap covering part of his face. To anyone looking from afar, it looked like just another customer. But the truth is that this wasn't just any client. This was Snoop Dogg. The store's environment was silent, just the ambient sound and the discreet buzz of customers strolling among the luxurious shelves. Well-trained staff moved quickly to serve each person exclusively, offering champagne and suggesting the most expensive products. But at that moment, something unexpected happened. The store owner, who until then had been focused on serving a well-known socialite, cast a brief glance toward the entrance, and that's when he saw Snoop Dogg. But instead of recognizing the living legend of music, instead of realizing that he was in front of one of the most influential and successful artists in the world, he only saw a man dressed simply, with no visible signs of wealth, and at the time, he thought he shouldn't be there. And it was at that exact moment that he made his first big mistake. Without even hiding it, he laughed. A low, short laugh, but full of mockery. A laugh that said, "What is this guy doing here?" As if for him it was unthinkable that someone like Snoop Dogg could buy anything in that store. It was a laugh of superiority, of someone who feels at the top and believes they can look down on others without consequences. But the most interesting detail, Snoop Dogg noticed. He didn't need anyone to say anything. He felt it in the air, in the way the store owner raised his eyebrow, in the half-smile on the corner of his mouth that was filled with disdain. And that's when the real story began. Snoop did not immediately react. He didn't change his voice, didn't return the angry look. He just continued walking calmly through the store, looking at the products curiously, touching some fabrics, observing the details of the pieces. He knew exactly what was going on there. But the store owner, on the other hand, didn't know anything. The man who had just entered there had already sold millions of records, had already toured all over the world, had already invested in million-dollar businesses. Snoop Dogg was more than an artist. He was a successful businessman, with massive assets and connections that many of those wealthy clients could never dream of having. But for that store owner, none of that mattered. He didn't see the legend. He didn't see the manager. He just saw a guy in a hoodie and a cap and decided right then and there that he didn't deserve respect. And as Snoop Dogg walked between the shelves, observing every detail, the store owner continued to laugh to himself. For him, it was almost a joke. Does this guy think he can buy something here? He thought. And it didn't take long for this arrogance to turn into even worse behavior. Upon realizing that Snoop Dogg was spending a considerable amount of time inside the store, calmly looking at the products, he decided to take action. He called one of the employees discreetly and whispered something in his ear. The attendant hesitated for a second, looked uncomfortable, but nodded and headed towards Snoop. When he got close, he cleared his throat slightly and said, in an almost rehearsed tone, "Sir, can I help you with anything?" The phrase seemed harmless, but the way it was said gave everything away. It was a cold tone, without the friendliness used with other customers. The attendant wasn't there to offer a real service. He was there to check if Snoop Dogg needed help with leave the store. Snoop looked at the employee for a moment, then looked away and smiled slightly. He had seen this happen many times before. He had been judged by his appearance countless times, but on that day, in that particular store, things would be different. Meanwhile, the store owner continued to watch from afar, with his arms crossed and a look of superiority. For him, it was only a matter of time before that unlikely client realized he was in the wrong place and got out of there alone. But Snoop Dogg didn't go away. He continued walking, taking his time, not caring about the looks or the store owner's suppressed laughter. He arrived at the showcase, where the most expensive and exclusive products were displayed, those that were only sold to a select group of customers. He stopped in front of one of the most valuable items, calmly examined it, touched the fabric between his fingers, and finally turned to the attendant and said, "Actually, I do need help." The employee hesitated for a second, looking at the store owner as if asking permission to continue serving. But before he could respond, the store owner himself decided to intervene. He approached slowly, with a smile full of arrogance, as if he was having fun with the situation. He stopped next to the employee, crossed his arms and looked Snoop Dogg up and down once again, as if he were analyzing an intruder on his territory. And then, without the slightest ceremony, he released the sentence that would make everything change. "Man, I don't think this store is for you." Those words cut the air like a blade. The intention behind them was clear. He didn't say it directly, but it was implied. "You don't belong here." It was the kind of comment that didn't need to be explained. The tone, the expression on his face, the sneer, everything made it clear what he really wanted to say. For a moment, silence took over the room. The employee froze. The few customers who were nearby discreetly stopped to observe. No one dared to intervene, but everyone felt the weight of those words. Snoop Dogg, on the other hand, remained calm. He didn't react immediately. He didn't get excited. He didn't change his voice. He just raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was processing what he had just heard. He had experienced this before. He had been through moments like this countless times throughout his life. It was nothing new to be judged by appearance. It was no surprise to be treated with prejudice by someone who thought they were superior. But what the store owner didn't know was that that attitude would have consequences. As if the verbal humiliation wasn't enough, the store owner also decided to reinforce the contempt in an even clearer way. He made a discreet signal with his hand, and in a matter of seconds, the store security guard approached. A large man with a rigid posture, who has already arrived at the owner's side with the obvious intention of resolving the situation. The security guard didn't even ask what was happening. There was no need. I was already used to this type of scene. To him, he was just another unwanted customer who needed to be removed. As soon as he stopped next to the store owner, he crossed his arms and stared at Snoop Dogg, making it clear that he was there to make sure he left without causing problems. The store owner then smiled with satisfaction, as if he had just resolved an inconvenience. As if he had shown once again that that space was only for a select group of people, and that Snoop Dogg, in his view, was not part of that group. "Maybe you'd better look elsewhere to buy it," he said, with a tone that mixed irony and contempt. Something more suitable. It was the last straw. The people around could not believe what they were witnessing. Some store employees began to feel uncomfortable, realizing something was out of the ordinary, but no one dared to speak. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Snoop Dogg, however, remained calm. He took a deep breath, gave a slight smile, and shook his head, like someone who has seen this type of behavior before and is no longer surprised. But what no one knew was that at that moment he had already made a decision. He would not leave there humiliated. He wouldn't lower his head. He would not let this situation pass without teaching a lesson that would never be forgotten. It was then that, with the calm and confidence of someone who knows exactly what he is doing, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made the store owner's eyes widen. It was a black card. Not just any card, but one of those that are only given to the ultra-rich. One of those that have no spending limit, which are exclusive to people with huge assets. A card that could literally buy the entire store without the balance, making the slightest difference. He twirled the card between his fingers for a few seconds, as if playing with it, before slowly placing it on the counter, in full view of everyone. The silence that followed was deafening. The store owner turned pale. The security guard, who had previously been rigid and ready to act, now seemed confused. The surrounding customers began to murmur among themselves, realizing that this scene was taking a completely unexpected turn, and that's when Snoop Dogg finally broke his silence. He looked directly at the store owner, and with a calm but meaningful tone of voice, he said, "I really hope this store is good enough for me now." It was at that moment that the penny dropped. The store owner realized he had made a colossal mistake. He realized that he had judged the wrong person, that he had humiliated one of the most influential men in the world, that he had exposed his arrogance to everyone around him, but it was already too late, because what happened next left everyone in the store completely shocked. And if you think this story has already reached its peak, hold on, because now comes the most unbelievable part. Snoop Dogg didn't just reveal who he was, he did something nobody expected, and the store owner, well, he would never forget that lesson. Now, tell me here in the comments, have you ever seen someone treated with contempt and then turn around? Have you ever been in a situation where they judged you without knowing you? Comment Karma doesn't fail here below, because I want to know your opinion on this story, and take the opportunity to like the video, because it helps a lot to spread this message and make more people learn that respect is something that can't be measured by money or appearance. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the continuation of this story, because what comes next is simply unbelievable. The atmosphere in the store, which until a few seconds ago had been filled with arrogance and contempt, was now plunged into absolute silence. The store owner, who previously wore a mocking smile, froze in place. His eyes fixed on that small piece of black plastic shining in the impeccable light of the luxurious environment. But that wasn't just any card. It was a black card, one of those that only a select group of people in the world have. One of those that have no limit, that are used by millionaires and billionaires for unimaginable transactions. The impact was immediate. The security guard, who until then maintained a rigid and intimidating posture, instinctively took a step back, as if he had just realized that he had made an irreversible mistake. The employee who had previously hesitated between answering or ignoring Snoop Dogg now looked from side to side, not knowing whether to intervene or wait to see what would happen next. Some nearby customers, who were just watching from afar, began to whisper among themselves, realizing that this scene was becoming something much bigger than they seemed to imagine. The store owner tried to swallow hard, but his throat was dry. He realized he wasn't just in front of any customer. He realized that he had humiliated someone who could, with a simple phone call, completely change the direction of that establishment. And the worst, he knew there was no going back. There was no excuse that could erase what had just happened. The card was still there on the counter, twirling lightly in Snoop Dogg's fingers, as if he was playing with the object, savoring the moment. But his expression remained serene, in no rush, without euphoria, without the need to prove anything to anyone. He just watched the reactions of the people around him. He wanted to see how far this store owner would go, and that was when the first repair attempt came. The store owner, still not knowing exactly what to do, laughed nervously. But this time, it wasn't the same arrogant laugh as before. No, this time it was a laugh full of discomfort, of nervousness, of someone who realized that their castle of superiority was crumbling right before their eyes. "Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "You know how it is, right? Sometimes we are deceived by appearances." But that excuse didn't work. Store employees had already understood that the tone had changed. The same employee who, minutes before, had been instructed to ignore Snoop Dogg, now approached smiling, trying to appear friendly. "Sir, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Can I show you some of our exclusive collections?" What was happening here was a typical twist of poetic justice. It was the exact moment when those they once despised were now desperately trying to right their wrong, but it was already too late. Snoop Dogg leaned forward slightly, resting his arm on the counter. The store owner was still smiling tensely, hoping for some kind of truce, some answer that would alleviate the shame he now felt. But instead of an immediate forgiveness, what he heard was something that made his stomach sink. "Ah, so now this store, and for me." The sentence fell like a bomb. The store owner felt the impact of the sarcasm, realized that Snoop Dogg had not forgotten for a second how he was treated. Silence spread throughout the room again. Customers nearby completely stopped what they were doing to watch. Some, who had not previously paid much attention, were now discreetly holding their cell phones, ready to record any unusual scene. After all, no one wanted to miss the exact moment when a big businessman publicly humiliated someone who underestimated him. But Snoop Dogg didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence, his look, his posture said it all. The store owner, realizing that his apology had not been well received, quickly changed his strategy. "Mr. Dogg, I'm really sorry for the misunderstanding," he said, now trying to adopt a more humble tone. "It was a silly mistake, you know. Sometimes we get confused, and I hope you can forgive me for that." But Snoop Dogg didn't respond immediately. He looked around, analyzing his surroundings, feeling the weight of the situation. The security guard, who had previously been ready to escort him out, now seemed smaller, almost shrunken. The employee who had been cold now smiled nervously, trying to find a way to redeem himself. And then, as if none of that mattered, Snoop Dogg picked up his black card from the counter and began twirling it between his fingers again, looking directly at the store owner. "What do you think would happen?" he began, pausing for a moment. If this story ended up on the internet, the question made the store owner lose color. He already knew the answer. It would be a complete disaster. A public humiliation, a scandal of gigantic proportions. The store's image, built over so many years, would crumble in a matter of minutes, and it was at that moment that Snoop Dogg realized that he was now in complete control of the situation. The store owner's voice trailed off. I really wish we could forget about this, Mr. Dogg, but forget? It wouldn't be that easy. Because now Snoop Dogg had an idea, and what did he do next? It made the store owner understand, in a brutal and definitive way, that that day would be remembered forever. And if you think he just left there and went on his way, you are very mistaken. What he did next was simply unexpected, and made every person in that environment feel the weight of poetic revenge firsthand. The store owner, already pale and helpless, watched Snoop Dogg twirl the black card between his fingers with the calmness of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The silence in the store was almost suffocating. The employees looked from side to side, waiting for some reaction, but no one dared to speak. The security guard, who minutes before was ready to escort Snoop out, now maintained a tense posture, trying to understand what was about to happen. Snoop Dogg took a deep breath, raised an eyebrow, and, without rushing, took his cell phone from his pocket. The store owner's eyes widened. He had already realized that he was facing someone important, but he still didn't know exactly how serious the situation was. And then, without raising his voice, without needing words of effect, Snoop Dogg simply made a call. The seconds that followed seemed like an eternity. The store owner tried to maintain his composure, but his fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. His gaze went from Snoop Dogg's cell phone screen to the surrounding customers, who were now watching everything as if they were about to witness something historic. It was a short conversation, a few words exchanged in a low, almost casual tone. A simple okay then before Snoop Dogg hung up and put his phone back in his pocket. The store owner tried to laugh, a nervous laugh, but he couldn't find the courage to ask what had just happened. And then, the longest minutes of his life began. Customers were whispering among themselves. Some were already holding their cell phones, ready to record any decisive moment. The store owner tried to recover his posture. He looked at the employee next to him as if asking for help, but no one knew how to react. He took a deep breath, tried to run his hands through his hair as if he was just dealing with an ordinary situation, but all his gestures betrayed the opposite. He was about to lose total control of the situation. And then the store door opened. All eyes immediately turned to the entrance. A man entered with firm steps, wearing an impeccable suit, carrying a black briefcase. His face was serious. His expression left no doubt. He wasn't there for a walk. The store owner took a step back. He knew exactly what was happening. The man approached Snoop Dogg and greeted him with a firm handshake. The store owner, still trying to process, opened his mouth to say something but was interrupted by the only sentence he ever wanted to hear at that moment. "Good afternoon, Mr. Dogg. Everything was provided exactly as you requested." The tension in the air became so thick it was almost possible to touch it. The employees were motionless. The customers were observing every detail. Some were holding their breath. The store owner felt a drop of sweat run down his temple. He opened his mouth again but couldn't make a sound. He was trying to understand what exactly was going on there. And then, as if to make everything even more cinematic, the lawyer opened the briefcase, took out some papers, and handed them to Snoop Dogg. It was only then that the store owner noticed. He realized that this wasn't just an awkward situation. It wasn't a simple misunderstanding that he could fix with a perfunctory apology. This was much, much more than that. He swallowed hard. He tried to compose himself, tried to regain the minimum of authority, but his entire body showed that he was about to collapse. Snoop Dogg took the papers, looked at them for a moment, and then finally looked up directly at the store owner. And he said just one sentence: "It looks like this store is mine now." The impact was immediate. The store employees exchanged incredulous looks. The customers began to murmur loudly. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others simply opened their eyes wide in disbelief at what they had just heard. But no one was more shocked than the store owner himself. He blinked rapidly, as if his mind hadn't been able to process the words. He opened his mouth again, but this time the sound that came out was an awkward stutter. "Oh, Kike." He looked at the lawyer, expecting it to be some kind of prank, a bad joke, but the serious look from the man in the suit confirmed everything. Snoop Dogg had just bought the store, and it hadn't been a long process. There was no negotiation. There was no time for counteroffers. The transaction had already been made, and the lawyer was just there to finalize the details. The store owner was now nothing more than an employee in the establishment itself, and at that moment he finally understood. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. The nervousness was visible. Sweat dripped faster. He tried to find a way out, tried to regain control of the situation, but there was nothing more he could do. The new store owner was right in front of him. And now the only question left was, what would Snoop Dogg do next? If you think this story has already reached its peak, you are wrong. What happened after this turn of events was even more unbelievable. And I want to know, have you ever seen someone who underestimated the wrong person and paid dearly for it? Have you ever witnessed a game changer that no one expected? Comment here, the game has changed. Because this story is far from over, and don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because what happens after this twist will leave your jaw dropped. The store owner felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His mind tried to find a logical explanation for what was happening, but everything around him was falling apart too quickly. The scene unfolding before his eyes felt like a nightmare he wanted to wake up from. But there was no escape. Snoop Dogg remained calm. He held the papers tightly, analyzing them for a moment before looking up and looking at the store owner. The silence was so heavy that even the employees seemed to hold their breath. The security guard, who had previously been prepared to remove Snoop, now stood motionless, watching the spectacle of poetic justice unfold right in front of him. The store owner opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His eyes bounced between the lawyer, the documents, and Snoop Dogg, desperately searching for an explanation that would make it all a mistake, a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Snoop Dogg then broke the silence with a phrase that would echo in that man's mind for the rest of his life. "I was going to spend a lot of money here today, but I think I'm going to buy this whole store." The humiliation was instantaneous. The store owner's face turned red, then pale, then red again. His entire body reacted to that sentence. He tried to laugh, but the sound that came out was more like a nervous sob. The surrounding customers widened their eyes. Some murmured among themselves, others put their hands to their mouths, shocked by what they were witnessing. The employees, who had previously been so accustomed to following their boss's arrogant orders, now seemed torn between embarrassment and surprise. The store owner finally found his voice, but the tone was no longer one of superiority. It was pure despair. But this can't be serious," he stuttered, trying to force a smile. I don't know who gave you this information, but this store is not for sale." Snoop Dogg didn't change. He just turned to his lawyer and made a simple gesture with his head. The man in the suit opened the briefcase once more and pulled out another set of papers. "Actually, yes," replied the lawyer, with the coolness of someone who had already closed much bigger deals. "And from what I see here, the acquisition process has already started. You have two options. You can cooperate and facilitate the transition, or you can complicate it, which will only make things worse for you." The store owner completely lost the color in his face. He knew there was no way to win this battle. But I... Before he could finish his sentence, Snoop Dogg stepped forward, leaning slightly towards the man, looking him in the eyes. "You judged a man by his appearance," he said, his voice firm but not needing to raise his tone. "You laughed, ignored, and tried to kick me out. Now, let's see who has the last laugh." The sentence landed like a blow. The store owner felt the direct impact on his ego, his pride, his image. For the first time, he was on the other side of the situation. For the first time, he was the one who felt small, powerless, invisible. He tried to hold on to whatever shred of dignity he had left. He tried to hide the growing fear that pulsed in his chest, but his body betrayed his intentions. His hands were shaking slightly. His gaze ran around the store, seeking support from his employees, but none of them dared to defend him. Now he was the one alone. Customers began to whisper louder. Everyone there knew they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered for a long time. A moment where arrogance received the punishment it deserved. Where the arrogance of someone who thought he was untouchable was ruthlessly destroyed. "Mr. Dogg," the store owner tried again, now in a much more humble tone. I didn't want any of this to happen. I made a mistake. A big mistake." "Yes," Snoop replied without hesitation. "Committed." The silence that followed was deafening. The store owner lowered his head, without arguments, without excuses, without anything that could reverse the situation. "So," Snoop Dogg continued, crossing his arms, "are you going to make things easier, or are we going to need to make things more complicated?" The store owner hesitated. He looked around one last time, looking for any sign of help, but he only found judgmental looks, customers who now looked at him with contempt, employees who tried to hide discreet smiles. He lost. He swallowed hard. He sighed. And finally, with a low, defeated voice, he replied, I'll cooperate." The tension in the air finally seemed to dissipate. The lawyer nodded, satisfied, and began to explain the next steps in the process. But Snoop Dogg wasn't done yet. He looked around the store, observed each employee, each customer, each detail of that place that in a few minutes would become his. He knew exactly what he would do next. What Snoop Dogg did in the next few moments not only ensured that that store owner never forgot his lesson, but also made sure the entire world knew this story. And if you think he just signed the papers and moved on with his life, you're completely wrong. Because what happened next, no one could have predicted. The silence that hung in the store now had a completely different weight. The store owner, who minutes ago felt on top of the world, now seemed like a defeated man, reduced to a mere spectator of his own failure. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now trembled with despair. His face was pale, sweaty, as if he was still trying to process what had just happened. He had just lost everything. The same space he treated as a private kingdom, where he decided who was worthy of respect and who wasn't, now belonged to Snoop Dogg. And the most ironic? This happened not because Snoop Dogg wanted revenge, but because fate had just taught him one of the greatest lessons in poetic justice that man could ever experience. The store employees, who had previously just watched the scene without getting involved, were now restless. Some exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they would still have their jobs, while others, more courageous, seemed pleased to see their arrogant boss finally being put in his place. Snoop Dogg remained calm throughout. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to shout or get excited. His silence, his look, his presence said it all. He had won. But the most impressive thing was that this victory wasn't just about the store owner. It was about all the people who had ever been humiliated in the same way, judged by their appearance, disrespected for no reason. And then, with a serenity that contrasted with the emotional chaos around him, Snoop Dogg smiled. He crossed his arms, slowly looked at the store owner and said, "Treat everyone with respect, not because they can be celebrities, but because it's the right thing to do." The sentence hung in the air for a few seconds. The store owner blinked a few times, swallowing hard, but was unable to respond. He knew there were no words that could repair the damage he himself caused. The surrounding customers started to murmur. Some nodded in approval, others looked at Snoop Dogg in awe. Everyone knew they had just witnessed a unique moment, a true example of karma acting in real time. The store owner, still in shock, tried one last trick. He took a deep breath, clasped his hands together as if he was begging, and said, in a trembling voice, "Mr. Dogg, I really messed up." It was a hasty judgment. I wish I could fix that. But it was already too late for empty regrets. Snoop Dogg just looked at him, no resentment, no anger, but also without mercy. The mistake had already been made, and now the price was being paid. As the store owner stood there, helplessly trying to find a way out, the employees began to move. Some were nervous, but others clearly hoped that this would be the beginning of a new era within that place. That's when one of the employees, a young man who'd been working there for a short time, took courage and approached Snoop Dogg. "Mr. Dogg, I never agreed with the way this guy treated people. I just wanted to say that if you really are going to take over the store, you can count on me to do things the right way." Snoop Dogg looked at the boy for a moment and smiled. "Good to know," he said, giving a slight nod. The store owner swallowed again. Now he was not only being humiliated, but he was also losing the loyalty of his own employees. The turnaround had been complete. At that moment, it became clear to everyone that the world really turns around. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment of poetic justice like this? Have you ever seen someone be humiliated and then come back in an epic way? So comment here. Karma doesn't forgive. And of course, if you like this type of story and believe that respect comes before anything else, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because this was just one of the many stories that prove that no one is above destiny. And believe me, what happened after that was even more unbelievable. And if you've made it this far, that means this story resonated with you. Because at the end of the day, what really matters isn't money, it's not expensive clothes, it's not status, it's respect. The respect that should be given to any person, regardless of appearance, bank account, or anything else. And if there's anything this story proved, it's that the world goes around and karma doesn't forgive. Now I want to know, do you believe that respect is worth more than luxury? If so, comment below. Respect is worth more than luxury. I want to see how many people truly understand the importance of this lesson. And if you like stories like this, leave a like so that more people can watch and understand that arrogance always exacts a high price. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because I always bring stories that show how fate can be ruthless towards those who think they can step on others. Now, if you want to see another incredible story of poetic justice, click on the video that is appearing on the screen. Now, I'll see you there.